Welcome to K21Academy. In this video, our cloud expert will guide you through setting up and managing Azure Virtual Machine scale set to ensure redundancy, scalability, and operational efficiency. You will learn how to configure availability zone, select appropriate instances, types, setting up auto scaling, managing networks, and implement load balancing. Additionally, we will cover deploying custom scripts for automated tasks, and we will also recommend scalable infrastructure solution for dynamic workload. Stay tuned until the end of the video for the free class from K21Academy to learn how you can enjoy and start your journey in cloud computing.
Now, what we are planning to do is that here we will be going through with virtual machine scale set. Okay. And here I can click on create virtual machine scale set. Yeah. So what we need to consider that here we can go ahead with, let's select the existing resource group and say VMS, VMSS, VM, East US, availability zone, since we are planning to scale and all that. So here we are going to provide that option. Okay. And what we need to do is that here we are planning to create and configure that operations in place. So select all three availability zone, right? So this availability zone basically give you the option, or maybe you can say it will allow you a kind of approach where you can simply plan and manage and configure your option. So let's keep all three availability zone. Here we have orchestration mode. So what do you mean by this particular orchestration mode? So orchestration mode is basically give you a kind of operational activity, right? Where I'm expecting that, okay, this instance when where it is like going on, or probably you can say provide the kind of operational activity. So what I'm expecting that this particular system basically give you the same size of server when the scale is required, or it should go ahead with different server or different infrastructure what we are like looking at it. So here I can consider that here probably the objective what I wanted, or maybe you can say the objective what I'm looking for, is that to provide you a kind of option. And maybe I can consider that, yeah, I mean, in this scenario, I will go ahead with same size of machine. So instead of flexible, I will keep it uniform way and standard security Windows Server 2019. And instead of B2MS or B2S, maybe I will lower down the size a little bit and say B2 instance only. Let's see. Yeah, here I will select B1S only. Let's keep it that and say select. So here what we need is that we can provide this option. Okay. And what we need to do is that we will be provisioning the further configuration, the credentials and all that. Now, when you are scaling, right? So I'll say that, okay, instead of manual scaling, I wanted to go ahead with auto scaling factor, right? And you can have scale configuration available that right now default conditions like minimum to maximum 20, CPU threshold with condition given 80 to 20%. If it's 80%, then it will increase the more number of instance, and if it's a 20%, then it will decrease the number of instance what we have. So this is basically a condition available. Now, if you want to edit this, like here you will see that threshold setup, that scale out and scale in, and query duration. So what it does, it will constantly check that you have this option available in the place, and it will give you a kind of operational activity that, okay, I mean, since you are going ahead with this particular activity, you will be able to plan and manage, and maybe you will be able to configure that operational activity the way you wanted to go about it. So here, basically, the expectation is that we wanted to plan and manage, or we wanted to configure that particular scenario, and it should basically help you out in terms of planning and managing or performing some of the attributes so that you will be able to take care of your particular, you can say, the condition to be applied, and accordingly you will be able to plan and manage and work operationally the way it is expected. So here, basically, the scope, what we need to consider is that how this particular option probably going to work out. And in case you wanted to plan and manage anything, or you wanted to configure anything, then what's the scope available? And here, like what kind of activity or approach maybe you will be able to plan and manage so that it works effectively into that system what we need to take care of it, right? So here is the option, or maybe you can say here is the activity where what we need to do or what we need to consider is that we wanted to plan and manage, or maybe you can say we wanted to configure this particular activity in place, and then it will help you out, or maybe you can say it will provide you kind of approach where you will be able to play around with the further activity the way it is expected. Yeah, so this is like a conditional activity. Now I'll leave it right now as is, no change required. I'll keep it default condition. Username and password. So here I will be giving credentials in that case. Now let's say instead of auto scaling, you wanted like manual scale, you can provide that as well, and you can configure the scaling policies and options what you wanted to provide in that case. So those options are also available. So as of now, we'll provide this, let's say VMSS, VM credentials. Then you have spot instance. As of now, the spot instance is not required. So we'll leave it as is. Disk, I will consider it as in standard SSD. Networking, here I can say, yeah, create new network and probably VNet range. What we need to provide is that, let's say 10.82.0.0/20, let's say, and subnet 0, where you can say 10.82.0.0/24 and say OK, and say review and create. Oops, sorry, what is missing? Load balancer. So here, basically, let's say I don't want any load balancer. If you want to attach any load balancer on top of that machine, right? So you can pick and choose and provide that load balancer or application gateway if in case anything you wanted to attach to it, right? So that is something we can provide. Now I'll keep it like right now. Let's say this NSZ under the virtual network. This one is done. Yeah, this is the NIC card. I will edit this, and instead of basic, I will say advanced. Okay. And under this particular advanced, we are supposed to provide the rule that what kind of access you wanted. And I will say like create new NSZ and provide inbound rule. And what I'm expecting is that I wanted to go ahead with my TCP protocol to be allowed. So here I will say HTTP, which basically enables your TCP port number 80 and all that, and say add. So I wanted to allow my machine to get access, you can say port range and all that stuff with the help of it. So this is the settings, and I'll click on OK. And load balancer, I'll leave it and say create load balancer. Okay, here I will say VMSS LB demo. We will be going ahead with public load balancer. Okay, we wanted that public load balancer to be attached to this instance, and the rest of the activity will leave it and say create. So it will provision your load balancer for your instance. Management, here I will say upgrade mode, manual, health monitoring, because it will constantly check that whether this instance is running perfectly fine or not. Let me as is. And here I will say spread algorithm, maximum spreading, or I will say no, fixed spreading. I don't want maximum spread because maximum will may go up to 20 or something, but I don't want that max value. So probably you can leave it as is, that okay, maximum 5 is fine for domain count and all that. So fixed spreading algorithm, we wanted to keep it as is. And if you want to add any extension, right? So here I will do one thing. in this particular task from day one or while provisioning this machine itself, I will use the same custom script which we have created and attached into that storage account, right? So this way, single script can be utilized at multiple places, right? And it will give you an option that when this machine gets created, it will have its own IIS script up and running and then attached to this particular instance. So here I will go ahead with review and create section. So here we can have option in place. Okay, let this VM get provision. So here it will start provisioning your virtual machine scale set. So let this instance get created. So this is something, if you observe, it will start with, see, if you see custom script deployment also started. So while provisioning VM itself, we are making sure that we have our operational activity to be in place. So let's provide this operational activity. So here, here, this is basically a kind of approach, or maybe you can say a kind of activity what we can consider. So here, if you see now, the virtual machine scale set got created. Okay, this is something where you can consider that your instance is up and running. Now here, if you can take a look at it, we have the like size, scaling and all that. So here important part is scaling. Now instead of manual scale, I will go ahead with custom auto scale. Right, so custom auto scale will allow you to perform some of the operational activity, and I will say scale based on metrics. Okay, and there is an option available called rule. So here, what we are planning to do is that we wanted to perform the rule on top of this. So I will click on add rule, and I will say virtual machine scale set to be available as a part of it, the host. The parameter which I wanted to check is like whether it's a CPU percentage, or here I will say network in total. Okay, like if I have network in total, maybe metric threshold greater than 10% if I keep, right? I mean, right now 70% is like meaningful, but 10% like I can test and validate quickly. And duration instead of 10 minute, I wanted to check in next 1 minute. I mean, right now we are dem testing so that 1 minute is more than enough. But when you are in real time scenario, then probably you can consider that in 1 minute you may not get that fast traffic. So you can consider that, okay, to test and validate or to see this particular activity, probably I can consider that this value will be like you can say it will be a kind of approach, or maybe you can say kind of activity where we can have this value will be available post 10 minutes or 15 minutes kind of aggregate traffic maybe we can have, and accordingly you will be able to scale with this particular option, right? So right now I can provide that, and rest of the properties I'll leave it as is. There is a cooldown period, and how many number of instance you wanted, that is something you can configure. So I will say add one more instance at a time and say add rule. Now here I will say like, okay, minimum in case you keep it one, maximum I will say three, and default like let's go ahead with one. So this is my scale condition, and I'll click on save. Property ID none path. Okay, there is a like metric triggers. What is the metric triggers? Let me say network in total greater than 10. Checking minute is 1. Rest of them is like average, instance count, add, and let me click on save. Now resource ID is there. So resource type is virtual machine scale set. Okay, this one is not showcasing. Okay, I think the VM resource is not getting loaded. Because of that, it is not happening. Let me refresh and see if that picks up the current virtual machine scale set. Because sometimes this may happen that resource got created somewhere in backend, but in front end, the resource may not get listed. So because of that, this happened. So I will say based on metrics, add rule. Let's see, this should work. It should display that virtual machine scale set. That is not coming up. Because of that, it is throwing an error. Okay. So here we do have like a virtual machine scale set property, which we can select that, okay, the scale rule apply on what, right? So virtual machine, it's not there. I mean, we do have standalone VM, but this is not the case. Here in our case, we wanted virtual machine scale set and it should provide me this resource name. So that is not getting listed. So this kind of like error, or maybe you can say the response you may come across. And the reason behind this problem statement is, so back into the system, your resource got created, okay? If I go and check in my resource group, so if you observe, virtual machine scale set got created, but the availability of that machine is still, we are waiting for it. So this one is not yet got provision, and because of that, this is happening. So let me give it a try one more time. Here I will say custom based on metric, add role. This is something it's not taking. If you see resource VMSS VM might not be present, please select different resource for scaling. So right now, I mean, I may have to wait for this resource to be up and running. I mean, once that is part of it, we will be able to test and validate that resource on regular basis. So there is a script given in your somewhere at bottom. Maybe let's see. Yeah, here it is. This is like my virtual machine testing script. So what I'm planning to do is that I will keep pinging my virtual machine IP or load balancer IP constantly with a while or do while or for loop kind of attribute. And what it does, it will constantly pinging that particular endpoint, constantly pinging that endpoint and response that, okay, things are working fine or not working fine. If it is working fine, then give me the response, give me the response. So that way, we are trying to generate false, you can say, traffic on that machine. And once it is accepting those network in total request hitting to that machine, if it is going more than 10%, then it will spin up one more instance, and you will be able to see that currently two machines are up and running. You will see third instance also to be available, and it will give you access on top of it. So it will provide you a kind of option. It will provide you a kind of like approach where you will be able to create and configure the option that how the system works, and it will give you a kind of approach, or maybe you can say it will give you a kind of activity where you will be able to automate your what do you call this thing, virtual machine scale set driven activity, and it will provide you access towards the output what we are like looking at it. So ultimately, like the goal over here is that from the enterprise point of view, you will be able to identify that, okay, I mean, if it's a virtual machine scale set. Now, what all the things get scale under this, okay? So when you are planning to go ahead with your scaling feature, so what Microsoft is going to do that they will basically scale not just only virtual machine, but it also scales your disk, or maybe I can say storage, your application which you have installed on top of it. So it will package that particular whole virtual machine or maybe the whole instance, whatever we have, and it will constantly like increasing or decreasing the number of instance with the same setup, same configuration in place. And then you can have dynamic scaling to occur behind the scene, and it will provision those instances on top of that. So ultimately, the goal over here is that we need to plan, or maybe you can say we need to visualize that in case of planning and working with some of the operational activity, or maybe you can say planning and working with some of this particular task, you may simplify your operational activity on top of it altogether, and that operational activity will help you out with planning and maintaining some sort of like virtual machine scale set kind of activity altogether. So in real-time enterprise world, if organization plan to migrate from on-premise to cloud and their primary migration platform is infrastructure as a service only, then you can basically recommend infrastructure as a service point of view, either as this with virtual machine to virtual machine. But let's say there are applications where customer is looking for horizontal scale and having more number of instances to be provisioned dynamically and take care of the scale features, or if they do not have that scale feature in place, but you are supposed to provide a solution and recommend such activity, then in that particular case also you will be able to provide that option, and altogether they will be able to plan and manage and work with this particular system on top of it. So the ultimate goal over here is that to provide you a kind of approach, or maybe you can say provide you a kind of like activity where you need to define that what sort of like task you wanted to go through with it, what kind of like provisioning activity you wanted to plan and manage with it, and then accordingly you will be able to go ahead with this with this particular operational like activity in on top of this particular infrastructure as a service, or maybe virtual machine or virtual machine scale set point of view. So only thing, I mean, from the application standpoint, if you think, then virtual machine and virtual machine scale set plays an important role, and you will be able to design your particular solution approach in a way so that you will be able to maintain that particular load balancer. You can have, and see, good thing is over here, like in previous exercises, what we created virtual machine and load balancer we created. Now, in that scenario, we created load balancer manually. We added like instance behind that load balancer as a backend pool, and we were like keep managing it. Now, when it comes to virtual machine scale set, similar to app service, in app service, what is happening? Microsoft will take care of that scalability feature with auto scaling, and it will increase decrease number of instance, and it will put behind the load balancer by default. So that is something automated system in platform as a service. But when it comes to infrastructure as a service, that is not the case. So to achieve that, here, this load balancer along with your virtual machine scale set will take care of that particular process for you. So it will create load balancer, it will add your backend pool or maybe the number of instance what you have given with min max value, that what is the maximum number of instance, what is the minimum number of instance. Even it will also matter with your load balancer type, whether you go ahead with basic load balancer or standard load balancer. So you can add or remove more number of instance and all of that, and you will be able to take care of that operational activity altogether. So it's more about planning and working with this particular instance, and that is something basically going to help you out in terms of planning and working with this operational activity, and then maybe you can manage your particular overall operations the way it is expected. So yeah, it's more about kind of task, or probably you can say it's more about like a process which you can implement over here, and probably you can have your virtual machine and virtual machine scale set to be taken care into the design consideration whatever we have. It's still giving me this issue, and now metric name is also not coming. Let me refresh my browser window. Let's say custom auto scale, scale on metric, add rule. Still it is not picking up. Okay, maybe I'll give it a try later and see if that works out. But usually it should take this, and like in certain scenario, maybe the UI is not capturing this particular backend, and because of that, this is happening, looks like. So if in case anything you have it in place, then I think you will be able to plug and play and manage that operational activity altogether. So I think you can have this option to be created, and you will be able to plan and manage and organize this particular system altogether. So yeah, I think when it comes to cloud perspective, or maybe you can say when it comes to operational activity, then this is basically the option maybe we can think through, and you will be able to plan and maintain and work this operational activity the way it is expected. So ultimately, it's a kind of approach, or maybe you can go ahead with this like your scenario to be taken care into the design consideration, and you will be able to implement this virtual machine scale set operations.
Well, that was our expert, and thank you so much for staying with us till the end of the video. Now, all you have to do is just click the link in the description below, or if you are just starting out, just type k21academy.com/azure02. Now, all you have to do is just enter a name, enter email ID, enter phone number, and click on register now. And you will be redirected to this page. You can also add this to your Google Calendar or Apple Calendar, and I promise this is something that you don't want to miss. So go ahead, click on the link and step into the world where learning knows no boundaries. Till then, keep enjoying. I'll see you in the next video.